The rain landing on your roof right now does not legally belong to you in 9 American states, and that law was not written by accident. In Colorado, catching rainwater from your own property was completely illegal from statehood in 1876 all the way through 2016, over 140 continuous years. Not restricted. Not taxed. Not capped at a set amount. Just flat out illegal to touch. In Utah today, you are legally permitted exactly 2 containers with a maximum combined capacity of 100 gallons, roughly 3 minutes of standard garden hose flow. Nevada requires a formal permit before you can legally hold a single drop that falls on your own land. Arizona runs a tiered permit system where the volume you are allowed to collect changes based on your county and your total land area. The most important part of these laws is not the specific numbers. It is the legal reasoning buried underneath them. In most of these 9 states, the law does not say you are being wasteful or inconsiderate of a shared resource. It says the water belongs to someone else before it ever hits the ground. Carmen found this out in Colorado Springs in the summer of 2012, when drought had turned her vegetable garden into a cracked, dry patch and her water bill had nearly doubled just keeping it alive. She bought 3 55-gallon rain barrels, connected them to her gutter downspouts, and assumed she was finally making a smart and responsible choice. 2 weeks after the next rainfall, a letter from the county water authority arrived telling her the barrels were in violation of state law. Water that had fallen from clouds, traveled down her roof shingles, run through her gutters, and pooled in containers she purchased on land she paid property taxes on, was not legally hers to keep. To understand how a rule like that gets written and then survives for 140 years, you need one legal concept that most American homeowners have never been taught. Water law across the American West operates under a doctrine called prior appropriation, built during the settlement era when freshwater was genuinely scarce and every river and creek was already spoken for. Prior appropriation means the person who first documented a water claim and put it to beneficial use owns those rights permanently, as property transferable through land sales across generations. Under prior appropriation, the rain that falls in your area is already legally allocated to downstream rights holders before it reaches your roof. It is part of a flow they have a documented legal claim to receive. The argument for preventing you from collecting it is that intercepting rainfall at your roofline removes it from the volume those downstream rights holders are legally entitled to. That argument sounds like a solid legal foundation, until you look at the actual hydrology data describing what rainwater does when it falls on a home in a city. The U.S. Geological Survey studied water behavior across urban and suburban environments and found that less than 3% of residential rooftop runoff ever reaches a natural aquifer recharge zone under normal conditions. The remaining 97% enters storm drain networks, concrete municipal channels, and combined sewer systems, none of which recharge the aquifer the prior appropriation protection argument is built to defend. The science directly contradicts the legal justification. That is the published conclusion of the federal agency responsible for national water monitoring, not a fringe position in any policy debate. The laws built on that justification have not been meaningfully updated in most states. Here's where the American Water Works Association becomes part of this picture, and what they did is documented in public legislative records, not inference. The AWWW Organization for Municipal Water Utilities in the United States, representing over 4,700 utility companies and water supply businesses. Between the late 1980s and mid-1990s, AWW representatives appeared before state legislature committees in Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and other western states to formally testify against proposed bills that would have permitted residential rainwater harvesting. The technical argument they brought to those hearings was aquifer recharge disruption, the exact same argument the USGS data was already beginning to undermine in published research at the time. The proposed bills failed in each state, and the existing restrictions remained in place for another 1 to 3 decades. All of this is in public state legislative archives and is cataloged in the NCSL's water law tracking database, searchable online by any member of the public today. The financial logic underneath that testimony was never stated out loud in any hearing room, but the arithmetic behind it is not complicated. A single household that collects and uses 12,000 gallons of its own rooftop rainwater annually is a household that buys 12,000 fewer gallons from the local utility. At the national average residential water rate of $5.50 per 1,000 gallons, that is $66 in lost revenue per customer per year. Multiply that across even 1% of the residential accounts in a major American city, and the aggregate loss crosses into millions of dollars annually for that utility. The water utility business runs on the assumption that residential customers buy all of their water from the supply system. A homeowner who partially exits that relationship represents a real, permanent reduction in recurring revenue. Colorado finally changed its law in 2016, after a decade of intensifying drought made the standing prohibition increasingly difficult to defend in public water conservation conversations. Carmen had been waiting for that change, watching the state legislature debate it for years while her barrels sat disconnected in the garage. The updated law allows 2 containers per household, up to a combined 110-gallon maximum, a genuine step forward from a total ban, but a carefully limited one relative to what a typical Colorado roof can actually collect. The actual collection potential of a standard residential roof is the number that puts that legal limit in full perspective. A 1,500 square foot home roof captures approximately 600 gallons of usable water from every single inch of rainfall that lands on it. Denver averages 14 inches of annual precipitation, which means a single Denver rooftop has the physical capacity to collect around 8,400 gallons per year. In a higher rainfall city like Nashville or Atlanta, where yearly totals regularly exceed 50 inches, that same roof size could capture over 30,000 gallons annually. Colorado's current law allows residents to legally retain 110 of those 8,400 available gallons. That is a 1.3% utilization ceiling written directly into state statute. Now look at the states that went a different direction entirely. Texas, Virginia, and North Carolina allow residential rainwater collection with no permit requirements, no volume caps, and no restrictions on how collected water can be used. Texas actively promotes it. State law exempts harvesting equipment from sales tax, and cities, including San Antonio and Austin, offer direct cash rebates to homeowners with verified installed systems. The legal difference between a Texas homeowner and a Colorado homeowner on this issue has nothing to do with how much rain falls on their roofs. Several Texas counties receive less annual rainfall than Denver. It is about which industry held more influence in which state legislature during the decades when these policies were locked in, and the testimony records make that comparison uncomfortably direct. If you are in a restriction state and want your current legal standing, the NCSL Water Law Database is publicly searchable and has been updated through 2024 for most states. Laws in this area have been shifting. At least 3 states relaxed restrictions since 2018 alone, and a 2-year-old article about your state's rules may already be out of date. If your state allows collection with a volume cap, install the full permitted capacity immediately and run the inlet through a mesh or carbon filter gutter diverter before water enters the barrel. Unfiltered collection introduces organic material and roof debris that creates mosquito habitat and can trigger code violations even in states where collection itself is fully legal. If you are in Texas, Virginia, or North Carolina, a 500 to 1,000 gallon polyethylene tank connected through a first flush diverter gives you a clean, usable supply for irrigation, toilet flushing, and with a sediment filter added, drinkable backup water. A first flush diverter automatically separates and discards the first 10 gallons of each rain event, the portion that carries the highest concentration of rooftop dust, bird waste, and organic debris, before water enters your storage tank. The complete entry-level setup runs approximately $200. A first flush diverter, 100-gallon barrel, a downspout connector, and overflow tubing, available from a single hardware store and installable in one afternoon. Carmen is now on her legal 2-barrel setup and collects from every meaningful storm between late March and September. Her summer water bill is down roughly 30% compared to the drought year peak. Her roof is physically collecting around 8,400 gallons of precipitation every year. She is legally permitted to keep 110 of them. The remaining 8,290 gallons drain into the city stormwater system. They do not recharge any aquifer. They do not flow to any downstream rights holder. They serve none of the legal interests the restriction was supposedly written to protect. They move through concrete channels and exit the watershed entirely, which is precisely what the USGS data said would happen in the 1990s, while the AWWA was still in those hearing rooms arguing otherwise. Nobody in those hearings was ever asked to address that specific outcome directly, and nobody at the time required them to. If you want to understand where else your monthly utility bills are being shaped by rules written by the same industries that collect them, there is already a video on this channel covering how natural gas distribution rates are structured, and what you find there looks very familiar.